Thank you, sir. Let's see. Representative Bacala for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions, but I want to start out my line of questioning by saying that we have a responsibility here on this committee to make sure the budget works for every entity, and we have a responsibility on this committee to make sure that what we spend this year we can afford in future years. So the sustainability of a budget, and as we talk about, and I'm in favor of giving the teachers a raise, but I have to tell you, in order to make it sustainable, we're going to have to find somebody to cut, because we can't sustain your raise. And once we give you a raise, we can't take it back. So it's permanent. So we're really going to have to fight to make this raise happen beyond just checking a box. The other thing that I would like to talk about, and we talked about being below the SEC average pay. Right now we're above. I think we spend more per pupil than anybody in the SEC, correct?
I would need to get you those numbers, but it depends on the calculation, but certainly we are certainly in the range or a little above.
I think we're maybe number one already in the SEC. We already spend more per than any other state in the SEC, which only means if we're spending more per pupil but paying $2,000 less per teacher, we're spending a lot of money somewhere else. Now, my colleague brought up a portion of that might be the UAL, but I think most states have a UAL issue that's similar to ours. So my question is, can we identify where we're paying or where we're spending more money than these other states that is taking money away from our teacher pay?
Yes, sir. A number of years ago, we did an extensive analysis trying to determine that, and we did identify that Louisiana receives so much federal dollars that are restricted, and that is calculated in that total per pupil expenditure. And so it does make us look like, we have a lot of money, but it is generally federal money that cannot be used at always.
What is it used for?
It is generally used for specific things in programs like Title I, where it can actually be used for the services for the students who are at risk of failure and things like that. There are very specific programmatic requirements. So the federal money is not, unlike some of the ESSER money, it is not as flexible.
But everybody has the opportunity to get it, all these other SEC schools.
Well,
I don't want to suggest they're getting zero. I mean, so how much is it skewed? Listen, you can't answer this question today. It's obvious. I think it's obvious that there ought to be an internal look at our education system to identify why we're so out of kilter with our SEC that we like to compare to, and where we're expending dollars that's taking dollars away from teachers today. Okay? I don't know if you're going to do it or not, because we don't have any authority to make it, but we ought to. It just makes sense to do that. The second part of this equation is, every year we pass laws saying schools shall do this, that, or the other, right? I mean, every year. There's a new list of to-do list that schools are legally required to do, but no oversight of whether they're doing those things or not that I know of. You guys are the entity that I guess are tasked with enforcing the mandates that are placed on schools by law, correct?
Not necessarily. Unless we're provided oversight or enforcement responsibility within the law. But we certainly have different measures that control some of that.
Well, do you go out and say, okay, are you complying? I'll give you a simple one. I think we require special ed teachers in classrooms, right? Because you mentioned special ed earlier. Do you go out and monitor whether school systems are actually employing certified special ed teachers? That's a simple one.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we have monitoring. We have a really advanced monitoring system for special education. Yes, sir.
All right. So my point is, what happens when you find noncompliance?
So within our monitoring system, there are various tiers of intervention and support. That could lead all the way at the bottom of the list, most severe that we would appoint, like special master type position that would be an oversight.
When have you done that? When and where has that been done?
Or we can hold back federal dollars. and put them in corrective action plans for that. And we have those in place right now.
Have we done it?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we say you can, but you have.
Yes, sir.
Another thing, like IEPs, whether they're done properly or not. How responsive are you guys to complaints along those lines? I mean, and I'm telling you, I'm hearing that people go to you guys and they do not get any satisfaction. That you guys seem to be very nonchalant about your responsibility to serve a parent in the best interest of their own child.
So we have what's called dispute resolution. When a local parent and their local school system cannot agree on items relative to the IEP, for instance, we have a dispute resolution process. It's a very formal process. Now, granted, sometimes the parent is not satisfied with the result of that process. Sometimes the system is not satisfied with the result of that process. But we do have a process that we follow. We follow it to the letter. But it doesn't always mean that the person is satisfied.
I'm going to get back to the budget in a minute. I'm kind of laying some groundwork for budget stuff here. But they also, I think that you place the burden on the parent to show that something wasn't done rather than the burden on the school system show that it was. It's kind of what I hear. It's kind of like the parent has to prove that the school didn't follow the rules rather than the school having to prove that they did, which a parent is less. Anyway, listen, I'm going to get back to my point on budget here. As we talk about differential payments and et cetera, quite frankly, I don't know if we ought to be paying an F school more money. I don't know if I ought to give them another dime till they get their act in order. I don't know if we ought to give a school system that has 80% attendance more money until they get their attendance up to 90%. I think we ought to we always talk about holding individual teachers responsible, but I kind of believe in peer pressure and the power of the dollar. And if I say, look, we're going to give more money to A and B schools because you earned it, or A and B school districts even. Not school, let's go to the district. I'm going to give an A district an extra money because guess what? Y'all have done your job well. I'm going to give a B system more money because you've done your job well. CDF school, get your act together, address truancy, address whatever it is that's keeping you as an F, and then you'll get more money too. And maybe that'll incentivize people to actually get something done instead of just getting more money for not performing up to task or not performing up to the level. Because we seem to forget in all this conversation, at the end of the day, it's about the kids. And it's about what an 8-year-old kid looks like when he's 80. Has he been prosperous or has he been held back by an inadequate education? So when do we get back to this being about children and the education of children and using the dollars as leverage to force people to get better, school systems to get better? I really believe this. I think until we start saying, buddy, get your act together and I'll give you more money, it's a guarantee. Every teacher in your system is going to get another $1,000 as soon as you become a C school or a B school. Guess what? I bet in real quick order they would get a whole bunch better. They would start paying attention to things like truancy that are holding their schools back, that are holding their systems back from being better. Have y'all even contemplated actually being the bad guy in regards to the bad schools? I mean, just saying, gentlemen, I'm sorry. Get better and we'll be there for you. Have y'all ever contemplated doing that?
There's many questions there for me to answer.
I said I'd go get on budget. I'm using the dollars now as leverage. That's my point. Okay, I guess, Mr. Chair, I don't see an answer coming, but I'm not being critical of you not answering, Ms. Brumley, because I know you don't want to answer that question. And I know that y'all have a Bessie board who is in charge of these things, and you answer to them. But I think until we take a stance that we're going to take a stance, and at the point in time when I say I want to recognize that we're going to look internally first and say, why do we fund our school system per pupil better than any SEC school, but we're 2,000 below in what we pay our teachers? When are we going to get more efficient internally so we can divert dollars where they need to go? When are we going to start looking at school systems? When are we going to start rewarding good school systems and holding those who are subpar accountable, holding them accountable for the purpose of ensuring that they get better? Because that's the only way we're going to do it, quite frankly, I think. I will say it again. It's time for us to use this budget to press bad systems to get better for the benefit of the kids. And it's time for you guys to look internally, and mostly we pass good law. I say mostly because sometimes I vote against them bad ones, right? But when are you guys going to really get on board with the idea that we entrust you guys with enforcing the laws that are out there to benefit the kids that we put in place? And look, now I'm gonna get off budget for a minute. I really think there's a component of a kid's education we're missing out on. That's a social component. And when we press so hard, when we don't give them enough recess time and play time and all those things that help develop personalities, I think that may be why we end up with kids with some mental issues in later life when they're in high school. They never learned to socialize. They never learned how to get along with people. But that's a different issue. But that's where I get off. That's where I got off my budget talk.
We have a bill this session, Representative, that requires mandatory recess for K-5 in all schools. It's not mandatory today. It would be 15 minutes mandatory. I agree with you. I think we talked a lot about trauma and mental health and well-being, and I just think if we gave kids an opportunity to go outside and play, catch a moment of break,
and I'll follow
it'll go
up.
a long way.
I do. I mean, I think. Listen, mental health is important too, and I'll follow up on the school safety issues. We do have, I think, some of the best laws in the country where we have mandatory reporting of credible threats. And when a child is determined to be potentially a credible threat or a threat, they are forced to go to mental health treatment before they're allowed to go back to the schools. And I think we need to pay close attention to that and make sure we don't falter or slip in enforcing that idea. And I think that'll help us to be safer places.